Welcome everyone. This is the NetConf session for IETF 121. It is Friday, and let's kick it. My name is Per Andersson. I'm co-chairing. Next to me is Kent Watson. Our secretary Rashad is not online yet. This is the note well of the IETF. You should read these documents that govern your participation here. I will not do a summary for you. These PCPs, go and read them. And note really well that when you're participating here, we are collaborating together, keeping it impersonal and professional. If you don't feel that it has been professional, there's a BCP that you can go and read, anti-harassment procedures, guidelines for code of conduct, an ombuds team, approach the chairs, and we'll direct you to the correct way to handle it. So this meeting is both on-site and remote. Please sign in, everyone that is on-site. There are QR codes that you probably may be aware of at the mics. If you're remote, you're already signed in. Use the hand to put yourself in queue when you want to speak, and remember to remove yourself from the queue when you have spoken your piece. We have a 2-hour slot. We will set a countdown timer. We have a very packed agenda, so please keep your time, and also please contribute to the minute taking. There's a link in the chat as well, and also in the agenda, and also on the slides that you see now. So we're a volunteer organization. Please volunteer your time, and we encourage your participation, either if it's mailing list engagement, comment on the microphone, review someone's draft, implement a draft and tell us how it went, shepherd a document, or other working group work like being a secretary. These are some of the documents that is now post to working group. We have a few RFCs worth a small celebration, I think. Okay. We have some other documents that are in the RFC editor queue, AD evaluation, and so on. These are the current working group documents. Most of them are work in progress still and being discussed on the site. We have 3 documents in working group last call. One of them will be discussed at this meeting. Another one will be has had an update posted to the list. So other working group work, we have had a NetConf interim discussing Yang notification specification gaps and Yang push notifications, problem statements for that. At the interim, it was requested to arrange for time, allocate time for discussion. I hope that that has been catered to in the non-charter work. There's ample time for a few documents there. Hope that works out. Regarding the NetConf and RESTConf next work, there has not been any significant progress in Prague, I think. And it looks like the working group currently missed the resources to progress this work. If you're interested, going back to the encourage participation slide, please volunteer to join in that effort to participate. This is the agenda, and as I said in the beginning, it's almost full. We're going to present NetConf over quick, NetConf private candidates, transaction ID mechanism for NetConf, list pagination. One notable thing with the list pagination is that both the co-chairs are authors, so we will need the AD to conclude the working group last call and someone else to shepherd this document. UDP client server, UDP notif, distributed notif, configuration tracing. and augmented by in the IETF Yang library. So this is the chartered items. Non-chartered items are quick client server draft, and then drafts for Yang push transport capabilities, Notif envelope, Yang push observability, and then a collector implementation presentation of HTTPS Notif. Yes, Mahesh.
Mahesh, on the list pagination, yes, I will try to drag the working group last call. And I was going to ask Rashad to be the document shepherd for this set of documents. My other question is around the NETCONF Next and RESTCONF Next. I don't know if, and this is similar to the question on Yang, but in the sense that is there value A in splitting NETCONF 1.2 from 2.0 to attract maybe more short-term work that maybe some people would be interested in, than putting it in a bigger basket where everyone says, "Oh, it's too much work."
So just to recap shortly with the NETCONF and RESTCONF Next, the work that was identified or classified was to do extensions to the current protocols, to do a minor update, a 1.2 or whatever it is for RESTCONF, and then of course something that leans on Yang Next. So it is classified and possible to work in that way, but there has been no effort progressing. Yes, and going forward, we will, as with this meeting and last meeting, continue to ask people to present updates, present updates for their documents, which has been done in a good way.
A couple updates on the slide that presented the recently published RFCs. 9640 was missing. That was cryptotypes. So that was the first of the block of those. And also you mentioned that there's 3 drafts that are post working group last call. That would be HTTP client server, NetConf client server, and RESTCONF client server. Those have been blocked somewhat because of a discuss from Francesca on HTTP client server draft. But the good news is that we met this morning along with some HTTP experts, and I think we've found a way to move forward with it. So looking forward to getting that work closed in the few weeks after the session. Is that last slide, right?
Yeah, that would be the last slide. So please, NetConf over quick, Mark Blanchett.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Mark Blanchett, 4th quarter. I'm no expert in both NetConf and Quick, but I'm presenting because I came from the use case. I'm involved in the IP in deep space, and NetConf over TCP or SSH won't work. SNMP actually worked just fine, but less fashionable these days. So we needed NetConf over Quick, then I became involved. So update on this work. There was a personal draft from the 3 initial quarters at the beginning of the slide that was adopted by this group on September. We then copy over the exact same text to the NetConf draft, so you could then see all the change. It's under the NetConf working group GitHub repo, and during the adoption call and after, we got comments that became 0.1 version. So if you want more details, go to the Git log. We got mostly editorial comments, abstract, tighten up the proper use of client server instead of manager and agent, rephrase that the idle timeout to be optionally set, replace keywords, including the ELPN protocol tag, remove strict text and various wordsmithing stuff. Well, actually one was a comment was remove redundant text about both Quick and NetConf, which we did. And the issue 7 hasn't been fully closed, so we did a lot. We kept some to give context about Quick ways to deal with stream, for example. So the commenter, if you think there should be more cuts, please, tell us what you think we should be doing. I think the same commenter said about leverage a text from RFC 9250, which is DNS over Quick. We didn't have time to look, and we're not sure exactly what to do. So if that commenter can tell us a little bit more what he was thinking about. And we had 2 additional comments that just came kind of a week or 2, and this will be discussed in the next slide. Because we have an initial proof of concept implementation underway by Adolfo Chagavia, and it's essentially a proxy. So when you see proxy on the first bullet, it's what was implemented. So this was a quote, without any bad meaning, a lazy implementation, which is take a full NetConf client and full NetConf server and just proxy them over a quick transport. So base flow is working. Adolfo is one of my colleagues. Details is the yellow exchange in a bidirectional stream started by the client. Framing is implicit. It's because it's provided by the stream abstraction in Quick. RPC and RPC reply are exchanged in bidirectional streams started by the client. Each request gets its own stream. Framing is therefore implicit. And by the way, roughly speaking, streams are essentially free in Quick. For example, if you carry HTTP over Quick, each request and response are created by new, where a request creates a new stream and the response goes to the same stream. So it's roughly just an ID, random ID that it, well, not, anyway, an ID, and they are essentially free. Notifications are received in a single unidirectional stream started by the server upon a subscription. A couple of questions is we have still, based on implementation, it is, should each notification be using its own unidirectional stream? Therefore, if we have different stream for each notification, that means that they become in bad order. Yep. And the other one is we should do a separate stream for RPC calls. So short draft, we intend to fix the remaining issues before next IETF. And if you have implemented, please feedback.
Yeah, so thank you very much. I see there are people in the queue, but we need to move on because we have a lot on the agenda. Thank you. So take the questions on the list.
Well, one queue is our AD, so Mahesh is, okay. Let's take it to the list, please, everybody.
Private candidates.
Can I start?
Yeah.
Good afternoon. As a very, very quick recap, this draft allows a client to commit changes to its own candidate data store, to commit just those changes. The draft also provides a mechanism to update the candidate with changes made to the running, and as part of that, to detect and resolve conflicts. Since Vancouver, the main bit of feedback we had, which was really great, was to simplify the draft by removing the private candidate NMDA data store, and that's what we've done. Instead, the client puts the existing candidate data store into a private candidate mode, and then it acts like a private candidate. The way they do that is by specifying the private candidate capability during session setup. This significantly simplifies the draft, both in terms of length and also in terms of complexity. I just want to reiterate that this mechanism always existed to support non-NMDA clients. So it's not like we've done a massive rewrite here. What we've done is we've removed the NMDA data store. The other main set of changes we've made is to incorporate suggestions from the working group to clarify wording. And we're very grateful to members of the working group for the time and energy they've put into reviewing the document so far. Going through the comments on the mailing list, the main outstanding discussion point seems to be this resolution mode parameter. To give a little bit of background to this, the draft defines a new update operation that can be used to update the private candidate with to reflect the latest running data store. As part of that update, conflicts can be detected and can be resolved, and the resolution mode parameter to the update operation specifies how those conflicts should be resolved. On the other hand, at commit time, an update also has to be run in the background, and again, conflicts can be detected, but as it's written in the draft, if conflicts are detected at commit time, the commit fails. The sort of outstanding discussion point is whether resolution mode should be added to the commit operation as well, so that it could resolve conflicts. In the opinion of the two authors, we think that this should not happen and the draft should stay as it is. The main reason behind this is one of sort of orthogonality. So at the moment, the update and commit operations are at least somewhat distinct. The update operation will detect conflicts and allows the user to resolve them, whereas the commit operation will just detect conflicts as part of its sort of background update. And adding a resolution mode to the commit operation sort of merges those two together. My clicker's broken.
Oops, sorry, I was in the chat window.
So that's the main discussion point. We've got a few updates in the pipeline. These are minor editorial changes, for example, adding a definition of rebase, which is a term that's used in the draft, and also changing the names of the conflict resolution options to prefer candidate, prefer running, and revert on conflict. To be clear, we're not changing the semantics of any of those conflict resolution options. We're just giving them better names. And thank you very much to Dylan for that suggestion. And finally, in terms of next steps, we will publish a 06 containing those minor editorial changes, at which point we would like to go to the working group for last call, because we think at this point the draft is ready. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions or comments. Great, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Transaction ID. Jan, are you ready?
Very good.
Dennis?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, loud and clear.
So this will be a short update on the transaction ID draft. As you may remember, the 06 version was posted in July, and since then a last call has been run, and we had a young doctor last call review. And the last call review found there was some unclarity or not so well formulated things around how clock management, about timestamps and things like that. And there has been 3 reviews with, in some cases, ample amounts of editorial comments. And I also got one partial review that was questioning the value of this whole concept and document. To meet these review comments, I posted a 07 version on October 19, and I believe that addresses all outstanding comments. And the main changes there is about this clock management simplification, if you like. And to give that a little bit more, here are the main changes. So I removed some language about this timestamps and wall clock time. I removed a few more sentences about clients must not infer something. And I added one quite significant example and one section about how to understand, or how to read this document. And I think that's about it. I'm wondering what we should do with this document at this point when it's been through one last call, and what happens now.
Any questions or comments on this draft? Okay, thank you.
So we probably will need to conclude the working group last call then, if you think that everything has been addressed, Jan. Thank you. So we're actually running ahead of time and have some space left, so that's great.
Good afternoon, everyone. So on behalf of the list pagination design team, actually I present this work. And so this list pagination protocol work has been broken down into 3 drafts. And the first focus on common mechanism to control filtering and allow you to retrieve the entry not only for the list but also for the div list. And 2 other drafts is proposed NETCONF extension, RESTConf extension, just to give you a quick overview. And this draft has been around for a while, actually already passed through one working group last call, and we actually already implement this worker. In the appendix, we actually gave some implementation, and some of 4 feature get implemented, and we also have some 2 other partial implementation. And the current status, you can see actually, we actually also discussed in the previous meeting. So all outstanding issue has been addressed. We design team get together to discuss this, and for example, limit the first issue, and we also make text overhaul. This breakdown local for order by the list, and also we actually take some time to validate the additional example in appendix. And also we have got a few review on the list. We already we engage this discussion, so we want to give some quick update. And for limit equal 0, this actually already get discussed in the previous meeting. Actually, the idea is to use the equal 0 to validate the query validity, and use this to quickly do return the empty result set. So this has already been implemented, and we think it's straightforward to go. And second update is we as we said, actually we updated the local text, and this local cursor issue. The other one is about example validation. For local for audit ordered by the list, actually we can break down into order by user and also order by the system. And for order by system, you can see we leave the control to the device, so device can use this local policy to for example select the encoding, select the language. And for the order by user, actually you you allow user to define arbitrary the order. So we think local doesn't need to be applied, so we don't need to report this local. So this based on what we have discussed. Validation example, actually you can see we actually we actually in the appendix we validated 2 additional missing part. Actually, one is related to RESTConf young dash data. The other one is list pagination NETCONF, and both actually get verified. And document review actually change we have made actually we design team get together reach agreement on this change. Three change we want to highlight. The first is we think we should support this one parameter grouping instead of multiple grouping with each grouping for per parameter. And the other one is about a feature actually use support option parameter. For example, we have three query parameters sorted by local and direction. We agree actually we can use this feature for this three query parameter. Leave this as optional. And also we actually add a query parameter capability to the NETCONF. And in addition, actually we get together to discuss this. We think this may be not reasonable. And for example, the cursor, and currently we use base 64. Actually, some discussion suggest we can change it to the any data. But we think currently we use cursor can support previous and next this kind of parameter more easily. Actually, we think more reasonable to keep still use this base 64. Second is about remaining attribute. Actually, some proposal think maybe elderly proposals we can use RPC augment. So, but we verify think remaining attribute may be much better than RPC. Another one is about conformance for the leaf list. We think it applied to both NetConf and ResConf, especially applied to the ResConf. So that's all the changes we have made. The current review we have go through. So we think we want to make another revision based on document review comments on the list, and so we like to request working with last call. Since both working with chair are co-author, so we want request AD to help initiate another second working with last call. Thank you.
Any questions or comments on this draft? So as a contributor, can you go back to the slide that was talking about the if feature statements and the capability statements? Yeah. So if features usually use, or feature statements are usually used in order to use if feature to constrain the data tree, right? And capabilities are usually used, or originally were used to, like, it's almost a misnomer. It's not capabilities, it's protocol capabilities. What's the protocol capable of? The protocol capabilities aren't there to constrain the data tree. So, but it looks like there's two different approaches to do this, the same idea. Like for one protocol, ResConf, we'd use features, and for the other protocol, we'd use for NetConf, we'd use capabilities. And just want to make sure there's not an inconsistency here, is there?
Yeah.
Pat and John, as a contributor, I don't know. I think we can clear the details on the list with Andy, who suggested it from the beginning.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
UDP client server?
Yeah, and also just to conclude on that one, the intention is to, so it said that the items had not been updated yet, but they actually are updated in the local copy. It's just a matter of publishing, putting it to the data tracker, at which point it seems like it'd be ready for the working group last call.
So hello to everyone. I'm Alex, presenting an update on the UDP client server draft. So just to give back a bit of context, so we are defining two groupings to generically so that they can be used for configuring UDP clients or UDP servers, either on standalone approaches or with other protocols. From the last discussions on the mailing list, we would like to thank the different reviews from Thomas, Benoit, Chin, Kent, and Andy. And there was a discussion on whether these groupings should define the default port 0. This was based on the client-server grouping draft, where they defined the default port 0 as a statement on these groupings. From the discussions during also on the auth 48 on the TCP client-server groupings, we have decided that it was a better approach to remove this statement so that consumers of these groupings can define both mandatory statements or defaults. There is still one default port 0 on the local port of the client, which means that if the consumer does not refine it, the client use one from the operating system. And other than that, there has been some editorial changes from some comments from the mailing list. We are mimicking the comments from the TCP client server draft, so with more specific details why these are defined these ways. And we have removed the dash groupings from both groupings and the dash supported from the feature statement as it was requested from the working group. So right now there has been actually a lot of changes. So these are the current state with not the grouping appended and the local binding without the supported, and then the port, which is not defined anymore as a default statement within the grouping. So there are only this open point right now. There was a discussion on the NETCONF quick client server draft, which defines client and server groupings for quick. The feedback from the working group was that these groupings can be also used outside of quick, and therefore should be moved maybe in another draft. Then, so the questions to the working group is, what is the general opinion on that? Should we move these groupings to the UDP client server? My take as an co-author of this draft is we should not. This is based on UDP, but also because it depends on different use cases, right? So someone can have a UDP client with only TLS 1.2, some others with only DTLS 1.3, some with both, and the same for the servers. Right now, the defined in the quick client server draft is the ones with DTLS 1.3. But yeah, requesting more feedback on how to move on this last issue.
Yeah. So Kent as a contributor, I agree. I think this draft should only be with the UDP groupings. And so the idea is that currently folks who want to do DTLS can really compose their own stack, a combination of the TCP TLS client server and the UDP client server. However, that said, it would be ideal if we had a DTLS client server. I don't want to sign you up for any more work, but that would be the ideal. And if you're interested, I think I'd be open to entertaining that as a separate work item.
Param Sean as a contributor. I'm not a Quick expert, but Quick doesn't use DTLS. It actually embeds TLS within the Quick messages.
Okay.
So DTLS runs on top of UDP, but Quick everything is baked into the Quick message. To my understanding, I might be wrong. Please correct me if so. And also just running ahead, that draft there, that is my draft, actually, the Quick client server, it adds more Quick protocol settings as well that is valid for a connection that you want to make. So I think that has stands on its own, basically. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. So my understanding is that the Quick client server draft would add on top of these two UDP client and TLS grouping some parameters related to Quick. So for me, it was, given that you are already defining these groupings, so I don't mind it there. But then, yeah, sure, it's how to move with this. Mahesh.
I was actually going to ask the question you asked is, how do you want to move forward? I would like the working group to make a decision. We've been going back and forth on this. So
yeah.
can we have a poll and
I'd love
make a
that, yeah.
decision?
Oop, sorry with the typo. UOD is UDP. Oh, layer. Yeah, later is supposed to be layers. I need to. Such a rush. Mahesh, you stressed me out.
Okay.
So already we have half of the attendance of the working group. I hear 44 attendees and 22 and it's pretty clear. We should
Okay.
just focus on this and with one no opinion. So yeah, that's good.
Okay. Thank you. And I think, yes, I think that's it. So in that case, yeah, I believe there are no open issues. So I will leave it to the church to maybe or asking for a working group last call.
I don't see any reason to delay longer. If the working group, does anyone in the working group feel otherwise? Excellent. Then we'll start the working group last call after this. Thank you. Is there more?
I think I have also the next slot.
Oh, yeah.
So here I am also giving an update on behalf of the authors on the UDP notif draft. So just to recall, this is a UDP-based transfer for configured subscriptions in YangPush. Since the last iterations, there haven't been a lot of changes. Well, anyway, so it has been only editorial, basically. We have had some reviews from Chiu-Fan and Joe Touch, and the editorial changes is fixing a Yang identity, enabling the segmentation by default so that clients using this protocol have the segmentation by default. And from feedback from Joe Touch that velocity was not well used, and we have harmonized it with the high frequency term. Open discussions. There was the default port discussion that has been brought up multiple times on the mailing list. So far, the feedback that I've got from the group is that it is not required. And also, we have contacted the Transport Directorate for expert review. So Joe Touch did a thorough review of the draft, and what he reported it was that since UDP notif is configured on both ends, the default port it's not required for the protocol. So I assume from these points that we can close this issue. And then there. Yes, please.
Yeah, so Kent as a contributor, I was probably the other side of that conversation. So I will concede with consensus that this is what we'll do, but I'll say it's rather odd. I would have thought that the working group would push for the port, and then the Joe Touch typically says, no, you don't need the port, and so that's the fight. But anyway, that's okay. Thank you.
Okay, and then the second was also brought up by Kent, I think, about how a client can discover that UDP notif is implemented on a node. And this is a very actually important issue. So with the others, we have, let's say, discuss and see how we can do that in a proper way. And we believe by implementing these UDP notif capabilities in a different draft might be a better way to address all this holistically, so that it is addressed for transport encoding security, but for both transport, not only UDP, but also HTTPS notif. And I believe there is a slot later on this draft. So what's next? So far, the authors believe there is no more remaining issues. This draft has remained stable actually over the last few meetings, and we believe it's ready for a working group last call.
Yeah, the chairs believe that maybe the transport review is not really concluded, and that would be good to conclude that in full before having a working group last call. Otherwise, it risks coming back from ISG anyway.
And then we should ping ourselves to the transport directorate again, or how should we address this?
So I have read the list thread on it, and I don't think it's really concluded. So I think you need to address the...
Okay.
Yeah, Thomas Graf speaking on behalf of the implementers who are currently implementing the UDP notif. They would like that we can proceed as quick as possible. So if we could proceed the last call and also the request to the transport directorate in parallel, that would be much appreciated.
I think the chairs will discuss that after. Okay, and I think the same slide deck is now for another draft, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Just a quick note, yeah, that if we believe that we are not getting a response from GeoTouch, is that why we believe it's stuck or it's not resolved, or
No,
we have not resolved the comment for?
My personal reading is that there are still outstanding issues, but I would like to go and read the mailing thread again. Maybe I have another opinion if I read it again, but that is my opinion at least, that there are still outstanding issues.
Okay, and we are okay, let's continue the conversation, but let's try to see if we can drive it.
I think the ball is in our court to respond to him one more time.
Okay.
And we can, the distributed NOTAF is only, there is no updates, so yeah, also giving an update on the distributed notif draft on behalf of the authors, and here basically the draft has remained stable. For a long time now. So here the same. We are. I think it's a good time to going last call.
Okay. Anyone in the working group disagrees?
I think my only hesitation is that there hasn't been a lot of discussion on this draft recently, but then again, that discussion could occur through the working group last call. So it's probably okay.
Yeah, that's why in a way we would like to trigger the last call so that we have at least comments, and so that we can address the last comments and then progress the documents. So that's our take.
Okay, any other comments? Thank you.
Hello, so I'm Jean Kilbeuf. I'm going to be presenting the update to the, thank you, transaction ID for configuration tracing on behalf of the authors. So actually the version is 0.3, but the only difference between 0.3 and 0.2 is that I updated the reference to the adopted draft instead of the personal draft. So the tracing configuration goal is to be able to trace a configuration among a stack of operator and controllers. So this is basically the goal of this draft. So the updates is to pass the client as an attribute of the RPC. So for instance, here inside the commit. And so it's now stated in the text. So the previous version was using the Yang annotation, which cannot be work because here we're not in Yang, we're in NetConf. So here is now we are completely within the NetConf part. The other updates were to align with the NetConf trace context extension. So we are now in several parts of the draft making the link with this draft. So we are now aligned with this draft. And so basically, there was one open issue, which is to whether we should do a more generic solution that would encompass all the complexity of the trace context and to be able to start from something more generic. And I think at this point we should really focus on the configuration tracing, so to have something that is simple to use and where we can actually have something easy to use. We've mapped this commit ID to the trace ID, and with that we should have something that is simple and usable. And yeah, so I think there's no open question left. So in my opinion, the draft should be ready for the last call.
Kent, as a contributor, I noticed on the earlier slide there's a NetConf specific example. I just want to ensure the draft is equally applicable to RESTConf.
Yes, so for RESTConf, the trace context would be passed as the HTTP header because it's the normal W3C mechanism. So it could be applied in that way directly.
Okay. Anybody have questions or comments on this draft, especially with regards to entering a working group last call? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We're getting lots of time back.
Yes, thank you very much for being expedient with time. Augmented by?
I started sharing, then I stopped sharing.
So I will introduce the update of draft augmented by into the IETF library on behalf of all the other authors. So just to recap a bit on the background and motivation of the draft, the idea is to provide a lightweight solution for utilizing the YAM modules as long as it's all of its dependencies, more specifically the reverse dependency. And it's inspired by an implementations of a YAM parser library, which is based on the libnetconf tool to connect to the router. And we discovered that it has the 4 actions of getting all the YAM modules in order to understand the YAM modules dependency list, and which would, when being applied to connected to the real routers, it would take minutes to complete these actions. So we believe it would be easier if we could directly export this from the IETF YAM library. So we have submitted 2 new versions since the last IETF, and the first one we have changed the draft names since because of the workgroup adoptions, and in the second one version we have corrected the YAMLing validation example, and we also delete the session for evaluation of RFC 8525 bits. So for the first, for the second version changes, which which is concerned to the content. We have corrected the YAM validation example because in the last version, the invalid example has been falsely put as the valid one. So in the invalid example, there is an augmentations across different module sets, which according to the YAM rules is not allowed. And we believe however, we believe the YAML validation example would be useful as a showcase for implementers of how this module will be, so it's supposed to work as a module that augments the IETF YAML library. And we also closed the idea of RFC 8525 bits because the author believes it's too big of test. That's not working.
Some technical issues with the presentation.
Sorry. Just a second, I'm going to stop the slides and restart them. Oh.
Anyway, the next slide should be the conclusion and the next step. The author believes that there are no open issues and we are asking for the work group last call.
I apologize, we're having a networking error here. Maybe a browser error. Is there anything else that you were hoping for a working group last call, right?
Yeah.
Was there any more slides after that?
Sorry?
Was there any more slides?
Just the last slides after.
You already spoke to it though?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's just the conclusion and next step.
Right, so the request is to enter a working group last call in this document, even though it was just very recently adopted. But it seems like it's run its course as far as I can see. Does anyone have any comments about that? Okay, we're back. You want to finish up that last slide? Okay. No comments and no one's in the queue, so I think we're good. Thank you. We'll start the work group last call after the meeting. Yeah? Yeah. Good. Next. Mhm.
Okay, so my name is Farhan John. I'm going to present the quick client and quick servers draft. This is non-chartered work. This is the introduction. We define YAM groupings for the quick protocol, reusing TLS client server and UDP client server, as you saw in our previous presentation, adding some transport parameters. That is not in the document currently on data tracker, but will be published soon. What is in the document, though, is an augmentation into NETCONF client server for the quick transport. And I would suggest that that goes better in the NETCONF over quick draft. But as an experiment, it was faster to me to just spin this draft and do it there. So the solution overview, yeah, uses TLS UDP groupings, require TLS 103, which we'll see, and adding quick transports parameters, not in the current draft, but in the Git repository. Okay. So IETF quick common YAML was introduced. It carries these parameters that seems to be reasonable that a client or a server would want to configure for their connections. And the quick client server then uses this grouping, and the same goes for quick server, uses this grouping as well, the transport parameters, the common transport parameters. Another comparison, for instance, there are drafts that already implement a quick transport, for instance, HTTP client server. It does it a bit differently, do a UDP and then TLS server parameters definitely, and does not carry any other quick protocol parameters. The idea with the quick client server would be to have a reusable grouping that could be used for NetConf over quick. Would probably not stop and update HTTP client server. Now that has been resolved, can maybe continue. But there might be other protocols and use cases for it, of course. Yes, Kent.
Kent, as a contributor, actually as author of the HTTP client server draft, be aware that there is a comment from Zahed, and the server grouping, the stack grouping will be changed a little bit. It probably doesn't matter much to this context, but what's on screen is not actually what's going to, it doesn't really, it's not the same as what's going to be published.
Yes, so NetConf over quick client server remote augments the NetConf client server. It should instead go into NetConf over quick. It's not obvious to include the quick client server groupings in the NetConf over quick draft, in my opinion. Some still open questions: what other parameters are valuable to add, and what's the correct level of configuration exposure for a client connection and a server connection? Next steps would be more feedback from the working group, valuable to update other documents with a quick transport, and I ask for the working group to adopt the document. Thank you, Mahesh.
Maybe Paul, to see if there's interest in adopting. And while Kent is typing up that question, and maybe I missed this in the presentation, you're defining a general grouping for the quick server with a TLS restriction. Any issues or anyone who might want to use? I don't know quick to know whether putting a restriction
Quick requires TLS 1.3.
Okay.
So that is why that restriction is there.
The poll is active. Oh, there we go. Just the refresh rate wasn't great. And for the record, when it refers to this document, of course, it means the quick client server draft document. Okay, well, it's unanimous at this point. A very clear result. Everyone has said yes to this, and I think it can be adopted. So we'll run the adoption poll after the meeting.
Thank you.
Let's see, already announced that we've moved into the uncharted section. No. Okay, just to be clear, we have moved into the uncharted document section of the meeting. That last presentation was not yet chartered work. And there we go.
Good. Thanks. Yeah, on behalf of the authors, we have a new document inspired by Ken's comment on the UDP notif that we're requiring for the transport protocols capability to have them properties being discoverable. So we created this document. And just to give an overview how that possibly plugs into the so-called message broker integration. So it's at the bottom when basically the subscription is being created, before the subscription is created, that we can actually discover the capabilities of the young publisher node. That so in RFC 8639 and also with the errata 6211, we have a requirement that basically the young push transport encodings needs to be discoverable. And then configured subscription in 8639, we have currently two options. One is UDP notif, the other one is HTTPS notif. And with RFC 9196, we have now two Yang modules, the system capabilities and the notification capabilities, where the system capabilities is basically a placeholder structure. So we can add a new capability items in there, which we will make use in this document of. And then the notification capability is actually augmenting the system capabilities. And there we have the notification related capabilities listed, and they are defined in section 3 of 9196. So this new document defines 3 additional properties, and one is the transport protocol, so that we can declare whatever UDP notif or HTTPS notif is being supported. Then we have the security protocol properties, so whatever DTLS, TLS, and so on is supported. And then on the encoding format, whatever CBOR, JSON, or XML is supported. This document is actually not a really new document. It's replacing an existing document which was previously already discussed in NetConf. That's the data export capabilities document. And as I said previously, the motivation was based on Ken's comment on basically having the encoding discoverable. And we think we are addressing now here beyond that scope, not only the encoding, but also the transport and security properties. And right, so maybe as a next step, we could ask the working group whatever they feel we are addressing with this document, the discoverability requirements. And then if yes, and we agree this is interesting for the working group, we could move forward as working group adoption. Yes, Kent.
Yeah, Kent as a contributor. Can you go back to slide 4, previous slide?
Sure.
So this module, it's implemented by the publisher, right?
That's correct, yes.
So the goal is for the publisher to discover the capabilities of the collector.
The client. So since it's implemented on the publisher, so it basically makes the information available, what different transport capabilities are available, a client can discover before he does the subscription.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm a little bit confused. I thought the idea was the publisher connects the collector and then asks the collector what capabilities it supports. And what I'm reading, it's more like the publisher is being configured to know what capabilities the collector supports. Is that right?
Not quite.
Not right.
So if you go to that slide, so I put in red circle, so it's the discovery mechanism where the client, the NetConf client who is configuring the Yang push publisher is capable of discovering the capabilities of the Yang push publisher. Okay. So this capability builds on top of 9196, where already the notification capabilities are being defined. However, for configured subscription, we not only have the notification capabilities, we also have the transport related capabilities that's currently missing.
I'll probably need to dig into that part just a little bit further.
Sure.
But I have a follow-up question, which is, in the HTTPS notif draft, it's done slightly differently, but would you suggest / recommend that the HTTPS notif draft should have or could have used this instead?
Exactly. So in the HTTPS notif draft, we are basically, so there are 2 mechanisms where we can discover capabilities. One is a NetConf capability, which is being described in UDP notif and also in HTTPS notif. And there is a second capability, which is the Yang capability, which is defined in 9196. And here we are extending that capability.
Okay, great.
So now basically we are supporting both kind of capabilities.
Okay, great. Yes. Thank you. And I see we have a queue. Robert?
Yes, so I think this is useful work. We're implementing this as part of the sort of Yang push implementation as a way of exposing our capabilities so that clients can know. So
speak a little louder.
I'm saying we are implementing this as part of our Yang push implementation. So it just allows us to advertise what the capabilities are, and hence when you're configuring the device, you discover those and then decide what configuration to use.
Okay. And next is Q is Andy.
Hi, I'm also implementing a lot of these drafts, but I have sort of a procedural issue, which is that this is a very expensive way to keep adding one leaf at a time. I would prefer that there were two RFCs, one for the transport layer, one for the application layer. That's, you know, under the umbrella of Yang Push version 2. Okay, so that we don't have to keep adopting one more leaf to improve Yang Push. It's and having a lot of RFCs to track is each with a tiny little thing in it is getting to be a lot of work. So at some point, can we streamline this work so that we agree it's adopted and we can finish it quickly? That's my request.
Sure. Thanks, Andy.
There is someone else in queue before you, but is your response to Andy? Okay, I have a quick response to Andy. I think the next presentation touches on that very point. Yang Push Lite. It's sort of it combines everything together into a single update, although it doesn't obsolete the 8639. Next in queue is Diego. Okay.
Please, Benoit.
So, Benoit, so you asked the feedback. Yes, it's absolutely required to know the capabilities of the devices in the network to do closed loop, whether this is like IETF and libraries, data nodes, or capabilities. So, yes, we need it.
Mm-hmm. And maybe just to answer Andy's question, so 91, 96 was designed exactly for that very purpose, that you can plug in system capabilities, and this is what we are doing here.
Any other comments about this? We already had a good queue. I think we probably need just a little bit more discussion on the list. I had a couple comments I wanted to dig into, but it seems like we could hopefully do an adoption call before 122.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Thank you.
I would like to remind the working group also that during the interim, this was what was requested to discuss now when everyone is in the room. So please, there's still, well, 1 minute now, but please use the time to discuss. And we're running ahead of schedule quite a bit as well. So there is ample time for discussion. But if there's no more discussion on this presentation, let's take the next one. Notif envelope.
Let's see, right?
Yes.
Yes. So Alex again presenting a new draft notice envelope. This is a request from the last interim meeting that rather than pushing for fixing a gap with Notif Yang to provide a new, brand new Yang push header. This new header needs to be to have an option to opt in to this new header, but also be able to be discoverable. Needs to be extensible and use Yang as a language to define this Yang header. Along the way, fixing the under definition of JSON and CBOR, and all at the end, the end goal is adding all the extensions that we are proposing at this working group, maybe within this new header. So, as I said, this is coming from the last interim meeting that happened in September of this year, where we have had some discussions on the Notif Yang, Yang push, but also NETCONF notifications. So the feedback and the conclusion from this interim meeting was that, okay, Notif Yang was fixing a gap, but it might be worth to put the effort on a brand new header, since it is a request from the working group. The conclusion was there is a need to bypass 5277 because it's limited to XML. Thus use a Yang push, a solution that is based on Yang push only. needs to be extensible so that we can add more new metadata, not only the ones that we are proposing now, but maybe in the future there might be new metadata that happens. Clients need to optionally opt into this new header. So older clients should work with the old XML-based header. This is a solution that is based on YANG. So the notification header is defined in a YANG module. And along the way, fixing the gap of the under the specification on JSON and CBOR, including at the end the CBOR seats allocations. Just quick, so the YANG push, it uses the XML-based schema that was defined in 5277, and that's why when this header is encoded in JSON, there is no actually current specification who defines how this should be encoded. So this is the gap that we try to solve on the older draft. So the proposal is, as I said, scoped to YANG push. YANG push can be implemented on both NetConf and RESTconf. But since it is scoped to YANG push, it can be implemented with both dynamic and configured subscriptions. As a request of using more, let's say, tooling-friendly implementations, use notifications, a notification statement rather than a structure. And right now it is a scope to YANG push, so the impacted notifications are the ones that are defined in the YANG push. So all the push updates, but also the control plane. So subscription started, modified, suspended, and so on. So now I will go point by point what we are proposing with this new draft. So first is we have an enable leaf so that the clients are enabled to explicitly say, okay, I want this new header. By default is set in the YANG module to false. So even one implementing in this draft, the operator need to explicitly say, okay, for YANG push, I really need this new header. So all the ones that are not enabled will continue receiving the header from 50 to 77. We are augmenting 91, 96 as the previous draft from Thomas, so that the management nodes can get from the router whether this header is implemented. So if they are implemented, they can get the YANG model saying, okay, I am able to send this new header, but also we have prepared the metadata container stating which metadata are supported in the node. Now the core part of the draft is the actual header. So the header is defined as a notification statement. We have the envelope, which has as a base two mandatory nodes, the event time and notifications contents, which is an any data node. And all the notifications that are defined in the YANG push implementations will remain on the notifications content node. As I said earlier, this can be implemented with both configured subscriptions and dynamic subscriptions. And then all the metadata that is implemented will be on the same level as the event time node. So along the way, we want to solve the under specification of JSON and CBOR on the notification header. So we are also adding for each encoding how this header looks like. So we have a mandatory node, event time, mandatory node, notification contents. What is the content on the notification content is specified with text. And then when the metadata is configured, this metadata will be present on the header. So far, we have only added one extension as an example. So it's about the host name and sequence numbers. So at the same level as the event time, when the node supports this host name and sequence numbers, these two leaves appear along with the event time. And it would look like this, a JSON example on the right. The way it works is that it is present by default when it is supported. And what we propose is to use the extension of 9196 to be able to know whether these two nodes are present on the header. So yes, this comes from the conclusion from the interim meeting from September, but we are looking for more feedback from the group. Is this the way to go? Should we focus as now on YAML push notifications or all the notifications? It is the notification statement valid the way it is, or it should be defined as a structure? Some smaller details about the XML namespace. So 50-77 defines a namespace that is based on XML, but current YAML modules on, or at least current YAML guidelines, they define it as a YAML. And then which let's say metadata extensions are interested from the working group that could be added on this draft. Just from the details, the other draft, we believed it was, we had plenty of support during the working group adoption call. We believe this is of interest of the working group, so we would like to get feedback or progress this work. So yeah, any questions or?
Per Andersson, as a contributor, I have a question about subscriptions on slide 4 or 5 or something. You can configure to use the new notif envelope. Yeah, that one, probably 6 then. You can configure to use it per subscription on dynamic subscriptions, but for configured subscriptions, it is global. Or is it per subscription?
So right now, everything is on a per subscription basis.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Joe, next in queue.
Joe Clark. I hadn't thought about the answer to all your questions. I do think this work is useful, and I think there's going to be some implementations or are implementations of it. I would say, though, and this is probably a good slide to land on, that I would say don't allow each metadata to be configurable. If you turn it on, you get what the device supports. Keep it simple. I also think on the next slide, this is more of a nit. Do you really need that capability notification envelope there? I mean, if it looks like you have a container, can you just say if that container exists, then you support this, and if you turn it on, then you get all of this metadata. And again, that's a nit. I would just say keep implementation simple.
Yeah, so on this, we are pretty aligned. So the way it works right now is once you enable this header, all the, let's say, extensions are sent on the node. And the fact that I implemented this metadata is actually for other, once this draft is an RFC or whatever, other extensions could be on a, yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly, so.
Hi, could you go to the slide with your questions on so I can remember what I was going to ask you?
Sorry.
Oh, yes. So should this notification be defined as a notification or as SX structure? I think it has to be defined as an SX structure because if you define it as a notification, it's going to use 5277 as an outer wrapper, and this will be inside that. So I think this isn't a notification. This is something that will hold notifications, and hence it needs to be a SX structure.
Okay.
And then the other one I heard in terms of where this is configured, it's configured per subscription. I wonder whether that's too low down. Not in our implementation, I think we would just require you to turn it on higher up than that or mandate it effectively rather than doing it per subscription.
Ah, okay, going up and up. Okay.
That's just our implementation. But otherwise, of course, I think this is useful and we are implementing this.
Andy, you're next in queue.
Hi, I'm also implementing this work, and I reviewed this draft, and I think it fixes all the concerns I have. As long as a new element is sent called envelope, the old code will still work because it's looking for notification. And that's so the concern was that multiple subscriptions can be going to the same receiver. Okay, so you can't. Uh, if I can see what Rob's talking about, that for simplification, you'd want all notifications going to the same receiver to be the same kind of header, but it actually can work this way. I think this draft's ready for working group last call. Even it's really covers all of the issues that like opt-in and the capabilities. So I think that this approach works well.
Thank you, Andy.
Rashad? Next
Yeah,
slide.
so plus one to what Rob said regarding, I'll also be more interested to see it at the global level, that per subscription. I haven't read the draft in detail, so was there a particular reason why this was done per subscription? Like, what did you envision which would be useful to have per subscription?
No, at least I just started as a subscription level, but I don't have any issue on getting it a bit upstairs. So I will go with what the working group decides. I myself, I don't have any issue on that.
Thank you.
Mahesh, I kept moving myself down. I wanted to get all the discussion in the room, but I'll just, and since I'm here, I might as well throw the question of, once we finish the discussion, can we, and there seems to be plenty of interest, questions of implementations in place, and people wanting to implement is, can we start the adoption process, and B, what will it take to get to working group last call?
Right, so I was going to conclude on that same point as well, but let's finish the queue. Next in queue, Tomas.
Actually, Mahesh just took my words. Yes, let's move forward because we have several implementers and we want to avoid that they are implementing the old mechanism. So, thanks.
So Per, as a contributor, I'm wondering about the notification versus SX structure. So I have in other business, I have an issue with Yanglint, which just skips when you have a metadata, when you have an extension like that. So how would that be validated if you go with the SX structure road? Since Yanglint, if you put in an SX structure, it's just like, okay, I'll accept whatever you give me. And I think generally that is how the Yang compiler and Yang tooling works. That if it sees an extension that it doesn't know, of course, one way would be to upgrade or fix Yanglint. But I mean, there's a lot of tooling probably that just skips over if you have a metadata extension.
I think that's always the issue with the notifications versus the structure. But here, yeah, I don't have the answer for. Maybe we should have a bit push on adding the structure into toolings. But yeah, I don't know. That's why at the end, when I started this work, I just put it notification rather than a structure because I got the same feedback from the interim. But yeah.
And Dan?
Dan Bell, Canada. Yes, I like the direction of this draft, and I will probably implement this as soon as it is available.
Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, so that was a robust discussion, lots of interest. I personally, I think it's good. This resolved many of the issues that were discussed during the interim, and thank you for that. Thank you. And right, so I think the chairs will discuss, but we'll try to start the adoption call shortly after the meeting.
Thank you.
So as Per mentioned, we are running a little bit ahead, which is wonderful. I think we'll have some time for an open mic session at the very end. So if there's any thoughts that people have they want to raise, there may be a little bit of time at the end to raise that.
So I have to confess that when I wrote these slides, I was assuming I'd have at most 5-minute slot. So I had some very compressed slides here. So, and I also noticed actually in this session that not many questions are getting asked until Alex came up. So maybe there'll be some more interaction on this one. I don't know. So anyway, so lots of us are implementing Yang Push, thanks to Thomas and him driving that through. And in the process of doing that, we've noticed various bits of the original Yang Push specification that all the vendors are saying, we're not implementing those bits. They're too complicated. They're too expensive to implement. And there's also other things we want to change to Yang Push to both make it easier to implement and make it easier to consume as well. So there's been this back and forth discussion between some of the vendors and some of the operators in terms of how can we make Yang Push a little bit better. And that's what this draft's about. So originally I wrote in it and called it IETF Yang Push extensions because this version of the draft was adding in some extra augmentations into Yang Push. But as we've evolved the discussions on here, effectively it's moved towards doing a Yang Push Lite, which is, I'll talk about it a bit more further on slides, but maybe doing like a replacement for Yang Push that sits alongside, that uses a lot of the same ideas and technology in places, but is a simple draft that actually sort of self-completes. So I think if this work goes forward, that'd be one of the interesting things to discuss. We've had quite a lot of discussions. So during this week, I've been chatting with various folks, both Thomas, Dan, and Holger from operators and things, and also James and Evan and Alex as well from the sort of vendor side, implementation side. So, effectively, there's been some good discussion happening this week, and I'm hoping that that will continue as we go forward. So what's the goal? What is it? The goal is to build a new Yang Push, and it's not effectively intended to write a completely new protocol here, but it's meant to be a minimal viable push, i.e. what specification can we write that all the vendors can agree will do this, and this is sufficient for basically the use cases that are being asked for. So we are trying to take out some of the bells and whistles that are in Yang Push that none of us are going to implement. And we're trying to add in a few other minor ones to also get it sort of to be a little bit better at the same time. What isn't it? So we're not starting from scratch and we're not reinventing the wheel. And I do have some nice pictures as well on this slice. Thank you, ChatGPT. So that's quite simple. So this isn't planned to be a brand new protocol. We're not expecting to write a brand new draft. We're hoping to move reasonably fast. We're hoping to reuse and leverage a lot of the existing code and existing encodings and things like that as well. So why are we doing it? I've sort of explained this already. So why aren't we just using Yang Push and subscribes notifications? And that was because they're too complex. They've got too many bits in it where none of us are implementing it and there's bits we want to change. So that's one of the angles and reasons why we're doing this change. The second one is most of the vendors also implement GNMI, and that gets quite a lot of traction in the industry. And these two protocols in terms of Yang Push and GNMI are sort of similar in many ways, and they have sort of similar sort of capabilities, but not quite the same. And so what we want to do here is we want to make Yang Push a bit better. In some ways, we want to pick up some of the capabilities in GNMI and bring them over to Yang Push, some of those sort of things that we feel like are maybe missing, but we're not trying to bring in everything from GNMI. And it's worth noting that it feels like the GNMI specification is a bit looser than often what you get in the IETF world, and hence in terms of implementations of GNMI, there's quite a lot of differences between different vendors, and that's causing problems for operators because our implementation does it one way, another vendor's implementation does it another way, and hence they don't work well together. And the GNMI specification seems to be evolving reasonably quickly in different ways, which again causes more version skew. I think our aim here is to try and get like a minimum specification, all agree, this is what we want to do, get it implemented, and then we have at least a baseline spec that everyone gets, and IETF ends up with a telemetry solution that can easily be deployed and widely adopted in the industry. So to sort of summarize, and this is not a complete list, and we had further discussions today. There's a pull request from James onto my GitHub repository, again with some more suggestions. So this is just an outline roughly of the sort of things we're looking at. And it's as I said, it's not complete. We won't do everything on here, but it gives you direction. So we're removing things like dampening that's in Yang push because that requires you to hold too much state to do it. And also again, speak to the operators, they don't have a requirement for it. The sort of negotiation procedure you have in Yang push where you can have this back and forth as I can't support this subscription with these parameters, but could you try these other settings instead? We don't think that that is either very easy for us to implement. And again, in terms of the operators, they're not asking for this. It's not necessary. They will know in advance what sort of subscriptions they're going to use. And we also think that if you need to monitor the load on the device, it'd be better to have some sort of operational data that says, this is what your load is from your subscriptions, and hence they can then make a judgment as to whether the box is too loaded or not. And the last one is some of the QoS settings in, I can't remember, maybe subscribe notifications where you can bind like the subscription dependency between different subscriptions and things like that. Again, it looks like a lot of complexity and nobody's asking for it. So what things are we want to do? We want to have a common encoding for periodic and on-change notifications. So rather than having using like a Yang patch for on-change and a sort of data tree for the periodic, we want to align those to the same structure. And that means that you're consuming these notifications. It allows you to consume the on-change and the periodic subscriptions in the same way. It gives us benefits as well because we don't have two encoding paths. So we're trying to align those together. We want to be able to split up the subscriptions and the replies coming back from the device. So Yang push today, if you subscribe to the root of the operational data store, then every time the period goes off, you're required to return all the data in one constructed tree of instance data. Now, that's not really that easy or feasible to do because it means probably the device that's implemented this might have to build and cache a very, very large data structure. Instead, if you look at the GNMI world, it's about sort of returning the data as you can and as you give it back. So again, we're looking more in that direction of allowing chunks of data to be returned within that subscription with enough metadata that the clients can then piece the data back together again. We want to look at some simplified filtering potentially. So that's one of these open ones. I don't want to go into too much detail, but I know there's some requirements for DT, for example, to be able to filter on some parameters. So we will look at what we can do without making it too complex there. I've mentioned before we want to align with GNMI wherever we can, where it's appropriate and where that makes sense, because it's better to have alignment where you can get it. There were some questions about the NACAM conformance and what you do, for example, if the user that sort of opened the subscription for a dial-in subscription has changed their policy, so they don't have access to some parts, you then go and close that subscription, or do you have to give delete notifications? And I think, again, Yang push today takes a very strict view that says, oh, you have to go and notify deletes for all these things. But in reality, that's hard or impossible to implement, and vendors basically won't be able to do that. So again, in the discussions we had today, it was more about keeping it simple. Let's do the easy thing. Let's document what needs to be done so everyone is on the same page, but let's not go overhead on something that's very hard to implement and complex. We might want to talk about agreeing a common base encoding. I don't want to go into too much details with that. And again, in terms of the filtering parameters. So the drive here is, if it's possible to get everyone to agree a common subset that we all implement in terms of these things, then it makes it easier to get interoperability. So there's been some open discussion onto this as to whether it makes sense to try and constrain those things or not, or keep the flexibility open. So nothing's been decided here, nothing's set in stone. I'm sure there'll be some sort of discussions here, but I don't want to get rat holed on this. It's not a key issue. It's a minor thing. And we'll be using, there's a draft already on GitHub, and there's a couple of people already contributing comments on that and a pull request and things. And that's our plan going forward, at least for the next few months, to try and get draft in shape. How we'll do this. So this is one of the big questions is what's this document look like that we're creating? And initially, the current version is a bit like extensions to probably 8641, maybe it's 39, I don't know. So it's some augmentation to the existing Yang models. I don't think we want to do that. I think number one is not the right option. And it really comes down to option 2 or 3. So one option is, in terms of if we do 2, is we take all the bits of Yang push that we want and we create a new protocol, Yang push Lite. It sits alongside the existing ones. We don't deprecate those. We don't do anything with them. They stay there. Anyone can implement them, but we're doing a separate version of Yang Push that's self-contained, describes everything it wants, and it's like you can implement this with like a different namespace, configuration namespace of how you configure it, but without, I'm going to, sorry, ignore the time if that's okay. Yeah. So we'll implement, so the idea is we'll implement a complete document, but of course we'll have to drag in a lot of document from our Yang Push, and the other things have been done, the extensions have been done now, so we can accredit the authors and things, but it will end up being a longer document. So that's one choice. And then the other one is to sort of not do that and have lots of sort of references to the existing 39 and 41, those extensions and things, and say, look, we're implementing this bit the same as in these documents, these RFCs. So it would be a shorter document and it will be functionally complete, but it'd be a harder document to read because you'd have to be jumping back to these other places and other sections to understand the details. So I definitely would like to hear any feedback that people have on this idea of whether to go sort of via 2 or 3, that would be good. At the moment, I think in terms of our sort of working progress, we'll be making up a list of what things you want to change, what the new things coming in. So a bit like 3, but we're also thinking maybe it makes sense to actually do this as number 2, as in a complete new RFC that has self-contained and has everything it needs. And the last slide is, so again, in terms of what we're planning to do, we're hoping to hold virtual meetings between the authors and interested people between now and IETF 122, meetings every couple of weeks, and we're trying to build the right thing, our minimal viable push. And it's initially it's looking like it's a small group of vendors will get together. We will keep the operators and things in the loop. We are welcome to have other people who want to join that call. That's fine, but we don't want it to be too big because, again, we want to move relatively fast and relatively quickly, at least these early stages, to get like an initial draft in. Not initial draft, but one that the working group can adopt in terms of being sort of functionally complete for the main stuff. And the goal, ideally, is that we would try and get something that is in the stage that could be adopted at IETF 122. That is quite a fast moving pace because it will be quite a lot of work to do here. So, and I see some people in the queue. Excellent. I've woken everyone up. Great.
And we have plenty of time for discussion, so we'll exhaust the whole queue.
Rashad.
Yeah, so if you go back on the previous slide, I see you had RFC singular. So do you really, I mean, if you look at Yang Push now, there's many of them. So was that a mistake or is that on purpose? That's first question.
That was a mistake, just to get the sort of conversation going.
Okay. Second question is, I mean, with number 2 is, I mean, I know we're in a different boat than we were many years ago, but if you start, I know you're saying you're not starting from scratch, but if you copy key parts, I'm just worried about the speed of progressing those documents. We know how long it took the previous docs. So, but I know there's more momentum now.
So the thinking there is we would be lifting large sections of text that have been effectively vetted and approved rather than writing the equivalent. So, and we would have an appendix to say where we're putting bits of text in from. So yes, I can appreciate that might involve more discussion, but hopefully lots of those discussions will be, no, we're trying to keep this the same, or we're trying to do this differently and highlight those differences there. But I do appreciate, yes, that might be more time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mahesh, speaking as a contributor, absolutely, as I said in the chat window, +1 to try to make Yang Push easier and simpler to both adopt and use. And when it comes to the question of what's on the list, I know you don't want to rat hole on certain topics like filtering. One solution is don't do it. Let you have more horsepower on the collector to do whatever filtering they want to do. Keep it simple, push the data, let the collector worry about the data.
And yes, I think that's sort of the direction we're sort of going, but I know there are some use cases where it's particularly useful to be able to say, I just want the records if this particular flag is set to true or false or something. I want to see this subset, and it will potentially greatly changes the amount of records you're returning. So I think it's definitely one we need to find the balance of what to do and not keep it too complicated. I think that for me at least, and others in the discussion, that trying to drive it to be simple and meet the minimum requirements is where we're going. And we can extend this, we can add extensions to these things if needs be. I think if we get conflicts, we'll try and keep stuff out rather than putting it in.
Oh, okay, I'm next in queue. So Kent, as a contributor, I'm very happy to see this work. If you some may be aware, the HPS notif draft almost went out of its way to avoid using 8639 in order to push configured subscriptions because it was just too complicated. And so the light here, this looks wonderful. And of the approaches, 2 or 3 looks good. I think a clean version, something that so people, ideally we would deprecate or 8639 41 later on.
And to like the HP's notif one, I think that one defines the receivers structure in that. And again, we would pull that in and would move some parameters that are currently under the subscription only to be under the receivers. Try and clean that all up and make it clear.
Yeah, and also there's a number of small drafts that are going through. They're augmenting parts of 8639. All that should get just put into the space draft.
Yes, we would do. We'd pull those in. Yeah. But I'm not saying I want those to stop being published because I know there's timelines that we're trying to, but that's different. But yes, simplification. Benoit.
So thank you for this work. Yes, we have to do it. And my point is interesting when I see that we spend so much time on the process here, because I believe that in the end, we should try to make it, to decide with the operators, with the vendor, what we can, what we want to do. And once we have this agreement, we're going to find an answer of the process. But let's not spend too much time on what we do in terms of document now, etc. I mean, there is work to be done. We focus on this and we'll find a way. And if it just cuts and pastes to a new document at the end, because this is the agreement, sure, it should not take too much time. It should not, right?
Yeah, I mean, my only fear is that sometimes if we put everything in, we drop a doc that's 60 pages in before the next IETF will people review it and things like that? So maybe we need to sort of get the both and things. I think there's enough interest in this work that would be okay. But that's my fear, that it's like, oh, something that's very big, rather than organically growing as the working group's doing it. So,
what I've been hearing in this meeting is that there are implementations from various drafts.
Yes.
So at some point in time, you take the biggest vendors, you take people doing tools, you take everybody, and the IETF, well, we could be spending time reviewing the nits, but this is a done deal.
Yes.
Right? So there is like process and there is doing the work. We have to find a balance in this case.
Yep. Thank you.
Maria?
Maria, developer of BERT, as a person or team who is trying to jump on the boat and not drown in between. I'd like to ask you, please don't use the choice to, because comparing several RFCs and checking whether several pieces of text are actually the same or a little bit different is a nightmare. If you want to do something like compressing more drafts together or something like that, or even saying that some RFCs are now this one, please do it the full way and say now there is a new RFC, a new draft, compiling all of these together, and it's replacing all of these, it's deprecating all of these, not just copying key parts. Yeah, either extending or the version 3 is also okay, but please don't copy things.
So have you implemented Yang push?
Sorry?
Have you implemented Yang push, so 89 or 41 today?
No, not yet. We are trying to jump into the boat.
Okay, so this is like heads up.
We are trying to catch it up. We are trying to catch up, and we are trying to reduce the amount of work we have to do before actually implementing something.
Okay.
Because reading the RFCs is already just a work for half a year.
Yes, so the one, I take your point on board, but the issue is that you either have a choice of what's easier for you for now versus what's easier for everyone else longer term. And the point about deprecating 39 and 41, yes, I think that should be discussion, but I don't want, again, the working group to get rat hold on them. I don't think that's the important issue, really. It's everyone getting alignment with where this is going to, and we can move the discussion, because you always deprecate the other ones separately as a separate update, rather than people saying, oh no, we're implementing Yang push, we want to do this. So, but I'll take that on board. But I think maybe what we'll try and do is, if we do copy the text, we'll have a reference. We'll say, look, this is what we've done and how this compares in the appendix. I suggested that earlier as well. So thank you.
Wei Sheng?
Yeah, thank you. This is Wei Changcheng from China Mobile. my comments have been mentioned. So I would like to see this document is really important. And as the slides just mentioned, if possible, we also would like to join the work on some coding and something like that. Thank you.
Okay, if you drop me an email, thank you.
Hello, yeah, Thomas Graf. Just wanted to mention, and I think it already picked up by Mahesh and the others. I think it's important that we move on quickly, like for instance, the versioning and observation time draft. If we can continue, let them on, because there are implementations going on. And then once the documents are all adopted, we can go on a second step and start seeing where we can consolidate as much as possible. We did it also with the sequencing host name and envelope draft already. So going a similar approach there.
And just to sort of add some more color to your comments there. So in the wider sort of Yang push discussions we've had, and most of this is happening in the NMOP working group, where we've sort of defined these minimum viable product phases, MVP 1, 2, and 3. And we've got various vendors and the operators in terms of deployment working towards finishing that MVP 1 towards March, and then code release a bit later on from that. So we don't want to derail that effort at all. And I think that this will follow on hopefully another 4 months or 8 months afterwards. But I know this process can take longer than you expect and anticipate. So we don't want to push everything back for this, but we want to move both of those in parallel. And it may be one of them, maybe it catches up and overtakes, I don't know, but we'll see. But unless we go very fast, we'll see.
Yeah,
thank you. Dan.
Yes, this work is very good news. It's very helpful for the operator side because it's go very well what we need and what we're trying to do. So it's going in the right direction. So I can't wait to see that it gets more traction.
Thank you.
I see lots of traction already. Holger.
Holger from DT. I just wanted to go on that point 2 or 3, how we move forward with the document. I wanted to say 2, but then I had just a comment from Maria with 3, and I thought, yes, recently I read RFC 863941. It was a pain to jump around in our document. So maybe we should start with like refer to the sections of the other documents, and then when we move on with all that, then copy it so that we have one document.
Yes, and that was one of the things that we had a conversation about this earlier today in terms of, I made that suggestion, it was like, yeah, maybe we do 3 as a first step and then we move on to do 2 further down the line. But I don't know, that might just slow us down. Maybe we try and do both at the same time. But again, it's more work if we do that. But yes, I'll take them on board. Thank you. Joe.
Joe Clark. As someone who's tried to read and troubleshoot things based on RFC, I would prefer 2. I think ultimately it'll be clearer. And I ask you to consider there's implementers in this room, there's vendors in this room, there are probably going to be vendors not in this room down the line. And we've already heard that there are a plethora of extensions. Andy was saying it'd be great if these get consolidated. I'm pleased that you're consolidating them. I would say consider being very explicit with how the coexistence of Yang push today and this will be, and maybe encourage people to think about encouraging people to write extensions just for this. These 2 can exist in parallel for a while, but make it clear for implementers why this is probably better to implement for operators. Vendors should think about all the lessons you've learned and move forward in that manner. So it's very clear if I'm going to pick something up as a new implementer, what I should do and why I should do it. And if it's this, fantastic.
Yeah, and we'll have some text in the document there. I may push it down to an appendix explaining what things we're taking out, what things we're adding, why we're doing it, and what the benefits and things like that are. So yes, that's definitely important for the document. Chin.
Yeah, Chin. Thanks for you do this work. I think this tool, obviously, Yang push has been published for a while. Actually, it's really laid the foundation for many important work. But still, for vendor, actually they take a different approach. Like a gRPC, and Yang push to implement this is still very complicated. So really, we're looking for some lightweight Yang push, and so So several thoughts actually. First, IB has a demo workshop. I think this integration you discussed with summer operator, maybe you can also, bring this work to NAM op workshop to get more feedback. And secondly, I think this is not the first time you take this kind of project, because we, develop like a L3SM, L3NM. We also break down, more reuser piece like attachment circuit. Actually, I think probably you can take a similar approach to try to flesh out a more reusable piece actually that can be applied all the scenario. And also, I think, I more favor the option 3. Seems maybe several other example like a T topology more complex. So they try to do the profile, right? So if you can break down, all the function, whether it is existing function or you define new function, you can establish some kind of profile, just like we do the device profile, but we never, succeed. So this some project I think we should take option 3. We more favor this.
Okay, thank you. And so in terms of any MOPS, if that's the right way to say it, so I got the feeling that was more longer term that we were focusing on in terms of that workshop, but I don't know. So I'm sure that could go into it and it can say, look, this is where we're going. I sort of seeing a split between what we're doing in the shorter term and longer term, maybe is a bit different, but I don't know. Somebody else can speak to that.
Okay, so monitoring the chat window, I see a lot of support for option number 2. I'm almost wondering if we do a poll on it, you think? We can only do a yes/no poll, so I don't know, it's kind of hard to do. Do you think option 2 is best? Something like that. Okay, well, anyway, but in any case, there's not a draft just yet.
There's initial draft that is there, so, and that's on GitHub, and that I published that alongside this, but that was just a starting point with some issues and some examples of a couple of these things. So it's like nowhere near what it needs to be yet.
Okay, so there's no chair action in terms of kicking off an adoption poll yet, but very looking forward to being able to do that. Ideally, maybe even before.
If we can get something that's close enough that is on the right track, it would be nice to make sure it gets enough time to discuss this in the next meeting. So I think that's the key thing.
Yeah, and I think I'd leave it maybe to the authors to choose if 2 or 3 is their best. I mean, you can look at the chat window and the meeting minutes that come out, but whatever's expedient and makes sense could work.
Okay, thank you. Thanks to everyone's comments.
Great. I'm glad we had extra time from earlier discussions, so we could allow that conversation to play out. And now for something different. Our last presentation is a report of an implementation of some of this work that we've just been discussing. We may or may not have time for the open mic at the end. We'll see.
Hello. Yeah. Right. Hi, I'm Maher, and I'm here to discuss a few implementations of the collector that we've been doing for the HTTPS Node draft, along with my team, Hayan, Siddharth, and Vartika. Right. Oh, yeah.
Slow down.
Okay, sure.
Introduce yourself.
Right. I'm Maher, by the way, and we're from NITK, and we've been implementing this collector draft. And so,
sorry, I just want to do a better introduction. The chairs were approached, and also AD Mahesh from professor. And what's the school?
NITK.
Put in the microphone.
Yeah. National Institute of Technology, Karnataka.
Right. Who has some students, and they wanted to implement the Yang push and collectors, and were asked for us to help them. And in that, and now they're coming back to us with a report. So that's what this is all about. Thank you. Please continue.
Right. So yeah, the HTTPS node of draft is basically a protocol for sending asynchronous notifications. It's very similar to 5277, but over HTTPS. And this would mean that though the publishers still would have to be a RESTconf or a NETCONF server, the collector doesn't need to, I mean, it could be, but it doesn't necessarily need to be a RESTconf or NETCONF server. It would just have to be a HTTPS server. And that would make the adoption sort of easier in general. Why HTTPS? Well, that's up to the discretion of the authors, but mainly because it maximizes transport level interoperability, along with offering us variety of encoding possibilities, right? In the draft and implementation, we focused on XML and JSON for now, but it could be extended later on as well. So we've mainly focused on the collectors implementation, and the draft kind of lays down that the collectors is supposed to have two resources, namely the get capabilities endpoint and the post relay notifications endpoint. So what the get capabilities endpoint does is it allows the publisher to sort of discover what all encodings that the collector is capable of processing. And the relay notification endpoint allows the publisher to post the event notifications to that endpoint. So the flow of the protocol is very simple. First, the publisher must query the collector for the get capabilities endpoint, and in its accept headers of the HTTP headers, it has to mention the encodings that it prefers. And then the collector would sort of process the accept headers, read its capabilities, and figure out the consensus and return all the capabilities in that particular encoding. After which, the publisher can post the event notifications to the relay notification endpoint, where the collector would then verify whether that event notification is semantically right when validated against the corresponding YANG module, and return like a corresponding HTTP status code. If it's not correct, some sort of error code. Right, so we've implemented the same as mentioned in the draft. Right. However, while implementing, there were some other intricacies that we sort of faced, mainly at the get capabilities endpoint. Is we were sort of left to think how the collector is supposed to read the capabilities, as it is not standardized, and it is no longer a REST conf or a NetConf server. It could store it in any format, and we would have sort of a lot of implementation differences over there. You could cache it, have an in-memory database, or read it however we want. And that's important because it would add to the response time in which the response is sent. So yeah, for implementing, we just required a basic web server, a request handler, and a little bit of application logic. And at the post endpoint, the application logic was to have YANG validation corresponding to that YANG module for every event notification that comes in. So what we've done is we've implemented in Python using Flask, which is a synchronous event handler, and Fast API, which is a synchronous event handler to make things fast. We've used the GUnicorn server to enable multi-threading, and for YANG validation, we've used YANGSON. We've also extended a C implementation, which has been done by Alex Hong, which uses libmicroHTTPD as the server daemon, and we've added validation and the application logic using libyang as the validator. Right. So here are a few results. We've done a basic testing where we've sort of have like 100 Go routines simulating 100 publishers simultaneously hitting all these endpoints for about 30 seconds. And these are just basic results. The C implementation takes the average response time is higher because it's single-threaded, while others are multi-threaded. The Fast API seems to be faster because it asynchronously handles the requests. However, one other thing I'd like to bring in notice is that though it might not be very clearly visible, the XML encoding actually takes a little bit more time to process than the JSON encoding, given the standard libraries that we're using. About 7 milliseconds or so, but it's that. We also have the response time distribution across percentiles, showing how you can see that the standard deviation is higher for the faster API responses because it's asynchronously handled, while for the Flask, it's like 50th percentile, 75th, and 99th percentile are all having similar response times. Right. Challenges in future work. Challenges, we actually spent a lot of time trying to understand YANG, and there was a very steep learning curve. And I'm happy to find that there's a lot of agreement in the room, given like there was a recursive reading through different RFCs trying to figure out which module corresponds to what actually. And also another issue we had was sort of finding proper Yang tooling, which is again mentioned many times. Few of them were not able to sort of validate a few modules, and it was hard to figure out which was the right one, which was not the right one. And another thing, challenge that we faced was it was sort of there was a lot of implementation scope. It wouldn't be a challenge, but like there's a lot of space to sort of do different things for implementation. For example, reading the capabilities data at the collector is sort of open to implementation, and that would sort of change the response time drastically for different vendors. And I don't know if it should be standardized, or I'm not sure, but that I thought would be a good thing to have. Future work, we've done very basic testing. We want to do more extensive testing and have more implementations in other languages to see how the statistics vary. And what we'd like to do is sort of have the data generation. Currently, we just it's just generated by script, the publisher, to have a more realistic one using maybe Linux virtual devices or some sort of events generated by sysrepo or sorts. And then all the data that is being collected by the collector to have a visual representation using pipelines by Prometheus and Grafana. Yep, that's it from my side. I'd like to thank the chairs for the opportunity to present. And any questions?
Yes, thank you for bringing this to the working group. It's always great to see people who are implementing it. And actually, if you go back, I think maybe 2 slides, this one. So I think this one we should learn from and some of this and take some of this on board. So when you said you found understanding Yang hard to read and things like that, now RC 7950, I think actually is a really good RFC. So it'd be interesting. Is it because the ties to NetConf made it harder, or the fact it's in XML, or what aspects made that tricky to do?
I mean, Yang independently, we could understand, okay, what are these different fields, what is going on, but the difficult part was to see which module was being used where and why was it this particular module, and sort of it was very difficult to integrate it within the workflow of the implementation. Like as an independent language, okay, this is the data model and this is how it works, this is what it is. That was fine. We could understand that, but yeah, again, the XML namespaces were different from the Yang namespaces, and it was a little confusing at many points for us. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
We are out of time. It's wonderful to see, student, it's a newcomer, first time to IETF, so it's great. So that concludes our session here at 121, and I don't have anything. Do you want to add anything?
Oh, thank you very much. See you next time.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, you want to come up? Yeah. Stand up.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
He said his name right.